He wasn't just an engineer, shipbuilder, cartographer, and an explorer who led an expedition to the West Indies. He was the love child of Elizabeth I's favourite, and a man who grew up to be a bigamist. Hi, I'm author and historian Claire Ridgway, and I'm here today to tell you the story of Sir Robert Dudley, illegitimate son of Robert Dudley, Earl of Leicester. On this day in Tudor history, the 7th of August 1574, mariner, cartographer and landowner Sir Robert Dudley was born at Sheen House, Richmond. His mother was Lady Douglas Sheffield, daughter of William Howard, 1st Baron Howard of Effingham. And yes, she really was called Douglas. It's thought that her parents named her in honour of her godmother, Lady Margaret Douglas, Countess of Lennox. Now, I could tell you about Dudley's cartography skills, his career and his expeditions, but I thought I'd focus on 1, how he actually came to be, and 2, why he's considered a bigamist. Robert's mother Douglas, who'd come to the court to serve as a maid of honour to Queen Elizabeth I by 1559, had married John Sheffield, 2nd Baron Sheffield, in 1560, having a son and daughter by him before he died in late 1568. Shortly after the Baron's death, Douglas fell in love with Robert Dudley, Earl of Leicester. And she wasn't the only one. Her sister Frances had also fallen for his charms. We know this because in May 1573, Gilbert Talbot wrote to his father, the Earl of Shrewsbury, commenting, "My Lord of Leicester is very much with Her Majesty, and she shows the same great good affection to him that she won't. Of late he has endeavoured to please her more than heretofore." There are 2 sisters now in the court that are very far in love with him, as they have been long. My Lady Sheffield and Frances Howard, they of like striving who shall love him better, are at great wars together, and the Queen thinketh not well of them, and not the better of him. By this means there are spies over him. It appears that Douglas won the war with her sister, for just a few months later she was pregnant with Leicester's son, giving birth on this day in 1574. It was no secret who the father was. Leicester acknowledged his son. But what was in question was whether the couple were married. At some point during their relationship, Leicester wrote a letter to Douglas explaining why he couldn't marry her. He wrote of how much he loved and liked her, but that he could not marry as he was bound to lose the Queen's favour. He also writes of how he was straight with her from the start, and that she accepted the situation. "And I trust after your widowhood began upon the first occasion of my coming to you, I did plainly and truly open unto you in what sort my goodwill should and might always remain to you, and showing you such reasons as then I had for ye performance of mine intent, as well as ever since. It seemed that you had fully resolved with yourself to dispose yourself accordingly, without any further expectation or hope of other dealing." It's a long letter, and I'll give you links to read it in full, and it appears to be honest and loving. Leicester cared for Douglas. He loved her. He just didn't feel that he could risk marrying her, not even when she gave him a son. But in 1604, early in the reign of King James I, when her son claimed he was legitimate in a case brought before the Star Chamber, Douglas claimed that in 1571 in Cannon Row, Westminster, Leicester had contracted to marry her, and that in the winter of 1573, when she'd found out that she was pregnant, they'd married in secret in her own chamber in Esher House. She spoke of how he'd given her a diamond ring and written letters to her addressing her as his wife, although she could not produce them. Douglas named 10 witnesses who, she said, among others, were present at the ceremony. But sadly, the majority of them were dead, and 2 witness testimonies were suspect at best. She also couldn't remember either the date of the ceremony or the name of the priest. As Conyers Reid points out in his journal article on Leicester's letter to Douglas, the strongest evidence against the marriage is that Douglas allowed Leicester to abandon her and take another wife without protest, and that she herself took another husband. Leicester married Lettice Devereux in September 1578, and Douglas married Sir Edward Stafford in November 1579. In 1578, Douglas could surely have done something following the scandal of Leicester's marriage to Lettice by getting the support of her brother, Charles Howard Lord Effingham, and others. but she didn't. In 1604, she explained that she'd been in fear of her life at the time, but Conyers Reid makes the point that following Leicester's marriage to Lettice, he was out of favour with Elizabeth, and that would have been the perfect time for Douglas to approach the Queen with her claim. It really does appear unlikely that Douglas and Leicester had been married. So, Sir Robert Dudley was illegitimate, but acknowledged, and he had a privileged childhood and received an excellent education. He was also a beneficiary of his father's will, receiving, amongst other properties, Kenilworth Castle. But I promised you that I'd cover how Dudley was a bigamist. Well, in 1596, following the death of his first wife, thought to have been Anne Cavendish, sister of explorer Sir Thomas Cavendish, Robert married Alice Lee, daughter of Sir Thomas Lee of Stoneleigh in Warwickshire, with whom he had 7 daughters. However, in 1605, he was travelling abroad with 19-year-old Elizabeth Southwell, daughter of Sir Robert Southwell and Lady Elizabeth Howard, and his first cousin once removed. On their travels, the couple converted from Protestantism to Catholicism, obtained a dispensation to marry, and married, with Dudley claiming that both of his previous marriages had been invalid due to the fact that he'd been pre-contracted in 1591 to marry Lady Frances Vavasour, one of the Queen's maids of honour. The Pope didn't recognise Dudley's marriage to Alice anyway, as they'd married with Protestant rites. Dudley and Elizabeth went on to have 12 or 13 children together. According to English law, Dudley was a bigamist, something that was a felony under James I. But Dudley managed to get away with it, although James I did step in to help Lady Alice and her daughters, granting them an annuity out of the revenues of Kenilworth, which he'd considered taking from Dudley. Did bigamy run in the family? And if you were interested in Dudley's career, well, in 1594 to 95, he led an ambitious but ultimately unsuccessful expedition to the West Indies and South America, hoping to establish English claims and search for treasure. Later exiled to Italy after a failed attempt to claim his father's title, Dudley went on to design naval fortifications and ships for the Grand Dukes of Tuscany. His greatest achievement was Del Arcano del Mare, 1646-47, a monumental maritime atlas and navigation treatise, the first of its kind by an Englishman. He was a pretty accomplished chap. So there you have it, Sir Robert Dudley, illegitimate courtier, explorer of the New World, naval mastermind in exile, and bigamist. He may not have inherited his father's title, but he certainly carried on the family flair for drama, secret weddings, and intrigue, and achieved greatness in his own right. Robert Dudley's story proves once again that truth really is stranger than fiction when it comes to Tudor history. If you enjoyed this story, do give it a like, leave me a comment with your thoughts, and subscribe to my channel for more tales from the Tudor world. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon. Bye bye.